Welcome to the OCI Grails Quickcast, bite-sized portions of Grails productivity tips to help maximize developer productivity with the framework. Grails Quickcasts are brought to you by OCI, the home of the core Grails development team and your source for professional support, project work, and training around the Grails framework. Grails Quickcasts are distributed in partnership with DZone, who help build knowledge and relationships to maximize your success. Alright, in this episode, what I want to do is I want to talk a little bit about doing Grails 3 development in IntelliJ IDEA. So this is not going to be any sort of comprehensive tutorial on how to use IntelliJ. What I want to do is demonstrate some features and tips and tricks that specifically relate to doing Grails 3 development in the IDE. So I've started by cloning our sample music application from GitHub. And now I want to open that project in the IDE. And opening a Grails 3 project in IntelliJ is super simple. So I've just selected the open button there. And I'm going to navigate out to the folder that contains our project. That's the folder that was just now created when I cloned that repository. And I want to accept the defaults here. I want to create a separate module per source set. And in particular, I want to use the default Gradle wrapper there. And as the IDE says, this is recommended. And notice that I don't have a Gradle home set. I don't even have to have Gradle installed ahead of time for this to work. The IDE will recognize or will use the Gradle wrapper that is configured in the project, and that's almost always what you want. So there we go. Let's resize this window so everything fits nicely in the video. There we go. Right, so the project is open in the IDE. If we look under the Grails app folder, you'll see several folders are configured as source folders. We've got controllers, init, and services. This particular project doesn't have any domain classes or tag libs in it. If it did, the IDE would recognize those and configure the appropriate source folders there. Also under source main Groovy, we've got some source out here, and same with under source test. So the IDE and Gradle conspired there to figure out where all the source directories were, and almost always what it configures for you is what you're going to want with respect to that. So one of the first things we might want to do is run the application. So every Grails 3 application has this application class in it, and this is what it looks like by default. In this project, we haven't made any changes to this class. So the class always has this main method in it, and we can run one of the ways, and I'll demonstrate a few ways to run the application, but one of the ways to run a Grails 3 application from the IDE is simply execute this main method. And when you do that, the IDE just now created this run configuration, and the first time I open a project in the IDE, what I'm going to do most often is run the application and then edit the configuration that was created, and I almost always am going to want to do that. And so that says -no verify as a VM option, and what that does is that turns off the bytecode verifier. And the reason I might want to turn off the bytecode verifier is turning the bytecode verifier off allows the reloading agent in Grails to work. So let me make a simple code change here. All right, so we've got some code there, and I'm going to start the application again. So the first time I started the application, I did that so the IDE would create that run configuration. And then I edited the configuration to have the no verify in it, and I stopped the app because I wanted to start it a second time with the no verify in place. So the application is starting up right now, and there we go. All right, we can go here, and we should see some output here that says in the search controller. And if I if I refresh this page a few times, we see in the search controller several times. And I'll change this to say in the updated search controller. And so the system will recognize that I've made a code change, the controller will be recompiled, and the reloading agent in the framework will recognize that change and reload it. And when I come back here and send some requests to the application, I just press refresh 3 or 4 times. Now we see in the updated search controller. So an important piece there is you have to turn off the bytecode verifier in order for reloading to work, and that's what the -no verify is for there. So I'll stop the app. Another way to run the application is with the Gradle boot run task, and that can be done from the command line. And when I'm doing Grails development in the IDE, I will almost always use the terminal, the built-in terminal support that is here, as opposed to command tabbing out to a real shell in my environment. I almost always want to take advantage of this terminal just because it's more convenient. It's right here in the IDE, and so when I want to execute Gradle tasks, as an example, I'll generally do that right here in the terminal that's in the IDE. And if I had several things going on and wanted to create several terminals, I can do that. Right? You can create as many as you like here, I think. So I'll close those two. So when you run the application from Gradle, the bytecode verification stuff is all managed for you automatically. So there, the application's up and running. I'll send some requests to the app. There's 1, 2, and 3. And we see in the updated search controller. So we'll get rid of the word updated there, and we'll see that once the system recognizes that change and recompiles the class. Now if I come out here and send some more requests to the app, we see the text is changed here. So that's evidence that the reloading agent really is working when I run the application from using the Gradle wrapper. All right, another thing I might want to do from the IDE is debug the application. So let's put a breakpoint right there, and we'll also go into the search service and we'll put a breakpoint right there. So I've got a couple of breakpoints in the project, and a way to run the application again is with this run configuration that was created earlier. If I click this green arrow, of course that'll run the application, and if I click the green bug next to it, that will run the application in debug mode. So I'll click the bug, and what's happening right now is the application is being started up very much like it would be if I had just run the application, but the debugging agent is being configured and started up. So when a request is sent to this controller action, we should hit this breakpoint, and we can interrogate the environment and find out what's going on. So if we come back here and refresh this page, we just now hit this breakpoint on line 11. We can see that search term is null, so that condition is going to be false. When I click continue here, the application just carries on, and now this page finished loading. So if I were to execute a search here, we'll search for Riverside. We just hit that breakpoint. We can interrogate this search term. We see the search term is Riverside. This is what I've typed in the search field in the browser. So we'll continue on. And this time what's going to happen is, since there is a search term, we're going to, this line of code will get executed. That's going to call the search method on our search service, and we've got a breakpoint in that method. There we go, we just hit it. And we're just into standard step debugging capabilities that the IDE has. So I can step over these one line at a time. I can step into methods. I can step out of methods. The debugging works just like it would in any standard Java Groovy application. So we'll go ahead and continue, and we should have our results in the browser. There we go, and we do. And maybe we're going to search for something else. We'll search for tool, and we hit our breakpoint in the controller again, right? We see the search term is tool. I'll click continue. Now we're in the search service. Again, I can see the search term is tool, and we'll continue, and I see some results back here. Now I'm going to go back and search for Riverside again, and we hit the breakpoint in the controller, but notice when I click continue, we're not going to hit the breakpoint in the service this time. There we go. We'll come back here and we see the results there. And the reason we didn't hit the breakpoint in the service that time is the service is marked with @cacheable. So the first time this method was called with Riverside, the code inside this method had to be executed, and a request was sent off to the iTunes store to find all the albums that match the word Riverside. And then the results of that were automatically cached because of this annotation. So the next time I executed that search, the caching mechanism in the framework recognized that we'd already searched for Riverside, so this code doesn't have to execute again. Instead, the results are just retrieved from the cache. So the IDE is aware of all of that, and all of that works as you would expect. So the way that I ran the application just then in debug mode is I clicked this bug while the application's run config was selected, and that starts up the application in debug mode. It might be the case that you want to launch the application from Gradle for some reason, and you want to debug the application. And a way to do that is so if I run the boot run task, that will just run the application, but I want to debug the application. So I'm passing as a command line argument there --debug /JVM. And we'll see the effect of that is that Gradle will recognize that I put --debug JVM there. And when it gets to the point where it's starting up the application, and it just got there, notice it says listening for transport DT socket at address 5005. The JVM is really in pause mode right now. The debug agent has been initialized in the JVM, and the debugging agent is waiting for me to connect a remote debugger to the process, and then it will continue on. So a way to do that in the IDE is you'll want to edit your configurations, and you want to create a new configuration. And a way to do that is with this plus sign up here. And there are a bunch of templates here for creating different kinds of configs, and we want to create a remote config. And I'll usually call it RDB for remote debug, but you can call it anything you like. And click OK. Typically I want all of these defaults here, so I'll click OK. And now I can run that RDB config in debug mode, and what that will do is connect the IDE's remote debugger to the debugging agent for the process that we just started in Gradle. And I happen to have started this in the terminal right here in IDEA, but had I executed this same command, Gradle W boot run debug JVM, just from out in a shell completely separate from the IDE, all of this would work exactly as it does here. So the fact that this shell happens to be in the IDE really doesn't affect any of this behavior. So I clicked the bug there while the RDB config was selected, and so the application should continue starting up, and the debug agent should connect to that process. And then when we interact with the application, it should behave very much like it did just a minute ago. So let's see what this looks like. We'll come over here. This is left over from the last time that I ran the application. So we'll start over. There we go. We hit the index action. Search term is null. We'll continue on. There we go. This is a restart of the application, so the cache is going to be empty. We see the search term is Riverside. There we go. We can step debug through all of that. We see some results. Same thing here. We'll hit the index action. We'll hit the search service. We see some results, and we'll go back and search for Riverside again. And we hit the index action, and we'll not hit the search service because of the caching stuff. Right? So I can debug the application either by running the application run config in debug mode, or I can debug the application by running the app with Gradle using a command like this, right? Gradle W boot run --debug JVM. And when you do that, as the application starts up, you'll get to a point where the debugging agent causes the JVM to pause and wait for you to connect a remote debugger. And the way to do that is to create the remote config as I did, and then click this bug, and that'll allow the process to continue. All right, another thing you might want to do is run tests from the IDE. So what have we got? We've got a search controller spec here, and I can run this test just like you would normally run run a unit test from the IDE. I can right click here and select run, and there are two different run configs here. One has the Grails logo and one has the, I guess that's a JUnit logo. And I'll select the one that has the JUnit logo. And what that'll do is that'll run the tests as you would expect. There we go, all the tests passed. But there's a problem with the way these tests are being run. And that is that the tests are actually being run in production mode. And that this particular application doesn't have a database or any environment specific stuff in it, but most Grails applications do. And when you run your tests, generally you want the application running in test mode. So to demonstrate this, the issue, what I'll do is I'll do something like this. All right, so I'll just add an assertion here that asserts that the applications, that the current environment really is environment.test. So this is simulating that there's some behavior in the application that is contingent on, that behaves differently in the test environment versus any other environment. So I'll run the test again, and I just pressed the keyboard shortcut to rerun the test. I could have clicked this green arrow up here. And I expect the test to fail because environment.current is actually going to be production and not test. And there we go. The test did fail, and we see environment.current really is production. So a way to deal with that is I can edit the run configuration here and specify -grails.env equals test. Right? Grails.env is the name of a system property that can be set to indicate which environment you want to run in. And now when I run the test, it's going to pass. And what I just did will work, but it's really not ideal. And I'll get to that. I just want to see the test pass first. There we go. The test passed. It really is running in test mode. But problem with that is in a real project, you might have lots and lots of test configurations, not just one or two. And you don't want to have to do this, edit all the run configurations to include that. So I'm going to delete that run config, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to look under these defaults. So under defaults are a bunch of templates that the IDE will use to create run configurations for tests and your remote debugger and running the application and so forth. What I want to do is find the JUnit template and put -d grails.env equals test, and I'll add another thing here. Demo.name equals foo, right? We'll see why I want that there in a minute. So this this isn't really a run configuration. This is a template. It's under these defaults. It's a template that will be used anytime a JUnit run configuration is created in this project. So now every time I open a new test and run it, it will pick up those settings. So let's demonstrate that. So I deleted the run config for this test. So when I run the test again, the run config it was just now created, and while the test is running, if we go look at this, we'll see that all those settings that I put in the template really did get inherited into this test spec. So you'll want to edit this JUnit template down here just once, and from that point forward, all of when you run JUnit test, they'll pick up those settings. One thing to watch out for is let's eliminate that, and I'm going to undo the change that we just made. Come down here and get rid of this. There we go. The run configuration is gone, and I'm going to run this test again, right? And the test is going to fail because it's going to run in production mode when I really want it to run in test mode. So I undid the change in the run template. There we go. The test failed. So some folks know about this, the issues that I'm discussing here, and sometimes you'll forget about it the first time you open a project in the IDE. So then they'll remember, okay, I need to come out here and edit this this thing here, and put -d grails.env equals test, and then go about their business. This one is still broken, right? If I run this test again, the change that I just made does not affect any existing run configurations. So if you've run some tests and then realize, oh, I need to do the the thing with Grails.env. You'll either need to iterate through all of the run configs that have already been created and edit them, or what I find is simpler is I'll just delete the run configs, and then the next time I run that test, the run config will be recreated and it will pick up the changes that I just made in the template. So I expect the test to pass this time. And that's it. So hopefully there were a couple of tips along the way there that you found helpful. Just some basic stuff about the most simple way to open a Grails 3 project in the IDE, and some tips about running the application and running the application in debug mode, and dealing with tests. And a lot of this relates to a couple of significant changes that we made in Grails 3. These are differences between Grails 3 and Grails 2. And one of them seems pretty benign, right? It doesn't seem very interesting that you can run an application, run a Grails 3 application by executing a main method. It doesn't seem terribly compelling. But in previous versions of Grails, so prior to Grails 3, to run a Grails application, you had to interact with the build system that was part of Grails. So that in order for the IDE to run a Grails app, it really had to know about the Grails build system. In Grails 3, we got rid of the build system that used to exist in Grails and replaced it with Gradle. So that means the IDE can load the project up and know about source folders and can do a whole lot of things without knowing anything at all about Grails, right? It's getting all of the path information and project structure from Gradle, and all of the major IDEs know about Gradle and have great Gradle support. And in addition to that, having this main method means that any IDE that knows about how to run a main method in a Groovy or Java class and knows about Gradle, any of those IDEs can now run and debug a Grails application, which is great. Thank you for watching this episode of the OCI Grails Quickcasts. For more information on how OCI can help you with Grails or any of these other practice areas, visit ociweb.com or contact us at info@ociweb.com. Follow our Twitter accounts @Object Computing and @Grails Framework. Also, read regular updates on the OCI Grails team blog at grailsblog.ociweb.com.